Hello, folks. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp, and welcome to 2024. Will this be the year that we actually create a sustainable planet? Will this be the year that we actually look past our differences and actually realized we share something called humanity and that we should all be at peace and work together to create a sustainable and caring and post-scarcity world? Is this the year? Maybe it is. Maybe this is the year that the greedy MFers, to keep it clean for the children, MFers at the top, stop ruling things. Maybe this is the year we evolve beyond the barbaric, ape like level of economic system called capitalism. Maybe this is the year. Could it be? Could 2024 be the one? Let's do it. Let's start right now. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing this hour with me. Thanks for joining one of the most censored shows in America. And just last week, my TikTok was banned. It's latest banning of many, but thank you all for doing your best to try to continue to find my shows. I'm going to bring you in this episode something very big that Israel does not want to admit that has just happened. I'm going to bring you that in just a few minutes. Also updates on the ongoing genocide that Israel commits against Gazans. Unfortunately, 2024, the beginning of 2024 has not stopped that fact that there is an ongoing genocide perpetrated by Israel. And in fact, another big public admission by a higher up in the Israeli government as to what the plan is, as to what they're actively trying to do. And it's a shocking admission because many of these admissions, many of which I've brought you, amount to war crimes. So it's at minimum, if not genocide. And so it is impressive to see them admit these things over and over again. But we have another one right now. And I'm going to bring you that. I'm also going to bring you more of 2023's most censored stories as brought to you or as researched by Project Censored. All of that is coming right now. So please hit thumbs up. Please hit subscribe or follow if you haven't already. But okay, so let's dive right in with some of the updates of the ongoing genocide. Oh, I'm also going to, bring you the sad news of two great names in activism and journalism and writing and just wonderful human beings that have unfortunately passed away in the last 24 to 48 hours. What a shit end to 2023. I will tell you that. Anyway, that's coming up as well. But at least 22,000 people, this is the latest updates coming from Al Jazeera and other outlets. 22,000 people have been murdered in just 3 months by the Israeli government. 22,000 people, 70% of those being women and children. So at least 70% of them are completely innocent women and children. But beyond that, of the remaining 30% that is men, many of those are completely innocent and have nothing to do with Hamas fighters. And on top of that, we're seeing the regional conflict begin to spiral into new territories, spiral perhaps out of control. Iran has deployed a warship to the Red Sea after the U.S. Navy attacked and killed Houthis trying to commandeer a commercial vessel. This is after the U.S. has essentially declared war on Yemen. They're not calling it war. They're not calling it declaring war. Actually, the U.S. doesn't declare war anymore. We just do it and act like it's not happening. But they've essentially declared war on Yemen. They are not calling it war. They're calling it, a special military procedure or whatever countries call things that should be war crimes nowadays. But they have announced that, but this is one of the first attacks by the U.S. on the Houthis in Yemen, and battles rage in central and southern Gaza after Israel announces it's pulling troops from the ground invasion, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Far more details on that in just a second. But yeah, let me throw this up on the screen so you can see some of this. Let's see. Well, let's begin with this. Israel has Israel forces have accelerated. They're not backing down, that's for sure. The bombing front, they have accelerated the amount of bombing that's going on right now, and the rate of their attacks in different areas. They've added that recent raids have focused on the central and southern parts of the Strip, which is an important point to put out there, because the southern part of Gaza was supposed to be where, it was where innocent Gazans were told to flee. They were told by the IDF. They were told via pamphlets raining down from the skies, go south. Basically, go south and you will be safe. Go south and we won't bomb you there. But of course, Israel is doing exactly that. They told these people to flee to these areas, and then they bombed those areas. Yet another war crime. The Israeli military has driven hundreds of thousands of people out of their homes in northern Gaza already, and it continues to squeeze Palestinian civilians into smaller areas as it expands its ground offensive. They are now transferring the military operations to the south, with growing calls for Palestinians to head to the last remaining designated safe zone in Rafah, which is completely overwhelmed with ongoing deterioration of humanitarian conditions there. And there's two reasons they're doing this. One is that they want to continue to pressure Egypt to take these refugees, to take these people who are dying in such insane numbers. And the other is because they want all of them packed together. They want all of the survivors after these tens of thousands of murders. They want all of them packed as tightly together as possible, because it breeds disease. It breeds various types of humanitarian crises, such as not enough water, not enough food. And it's also easier to attack people that are all slammed together in a tiny area. But I think the main reason is to breed disease, which many UN reports and others have said that disease may ultimately kill more across Gaza than bombs will. And that's Israel's goal. So this is all part of the plan. It's not because they want the people to be safe together in the refugee camps or something like that. It's pure insanity and pure ethnic cleansing. But so I also wanted to mention, and I haven't heard this talked about really enough, that there's 22,000 that have been murdered so far, but there's also 57,700 injured Gazans. Almost 58,000 Gazans injured. Now, in a regular country with regular operating health systems, etc., a lot of those injuries would not be life-threatening. You could have amputations that are not life-threatening. You could have people get hit by shrapnel or have broken limbs and things like that and not have it be life-threatening. But in such a tiny area where they're not allowed medical supplies in, and the health systems are collapsing, and the hospitals are bombed, many of these injuries, these 58,000 injured, are life-threatening. And again, that is another goal of Israel, is to make things that would not normally be life-threatening be life-threatening, to make things that would not normally kill people, kill them. And it's all part of the ethnic cleansing. If they can kill 22,000 outright over 3 months, but then also kill 20,000 or even if it's just 5,000 of the 60,000 that are injured because they have no access to medical care, then great. That's another 5,000 they've ethnically cleansed. And that, again, is pretty evidently their plan. So not enough is talked about the injured. And I think that comes from the fact that we're picturing a modern health system that has not collapsed. I don't mean we're picturing it in Gaza, but we just imagine in our minds, if you break a limb in the United States, or even many types of cancer, if you get many types of cancer in the United States, many of them are not life-threatening. But this is pre-October 7th, the percentage of people that survived breast cancer in Gaza was way, way lower than in most modern nations, because they don't have access to the type of medicines that they need. And so, again, this is a lot of this predates October 7th, the hope that Israel has had that these people would die off in ways that don't even require bombs. They can save their bombs and then they can just kill them in other ways. But yeah, the 58,000 injured is just a crazy number. But okay, let's get to this admission that I mentioned at the beginning here, that yet another admission by Israel or by top level ministers, cabinet ministers, etc., in Israel of their goals. Let's see, where's the article? So this is actually from the Jerusalem Post, which is a pro-Israel outlet, but they're talking about what this cabinet minister said, or finance minister, Israel finance minister Bezalel Smotrich. Now he said several things to Army Radio on Sunday. But basically, almost everything he says endorses ethnic cleansing in one way or another. He says if in Gaza there were only 100,000 or 200,000 Arabs and not 2 million, the entire conversation would be different. Basically, if we can just, if almost 2 million people can just disappear in smoke, whether they flee or are murdered, then it's not that big a deal. We can handle it. We can easily imprison 200,000. It's so much easier to handle than imprisoning 2.2 million. So, that's just one of his quotes. Some of his other quotes that he said during this interview is, the right solution in the Gaza Strip is to encourage the migration of Gaza residents to countries that agree to receive them. Now, if you are kind of indoctrinated correctly, you may not view that as that edgy of a statement, right? Encouraging migration, it sounds fine. But when you lay it next to endless bombing inside a open-air prison, encouraging migration while you're bombing people, while you're bombing innocent civilians, while you're bombing 70% women and children, while you're killing almost 50% children with every bomb blast, to lay those two on top of each other, it's absolutely ethnic cleansing. It's saying our goal is to get you, to lightly encourage you via murdering all your friends and family, to move along, to leave this open air prison we've created and go to countries that aren't even necessarily accepting you, both because they don't necessarily believe they have the capability to take in 2 million people, but also because they believe, and there's an easy argument to make that this is true, that they would be facilitating genocide if they agreed to, and ethnic cleansing, if they agreed to take in all the refugees, because it says to Israel, yeah, just bomb a bunch of people and then we'll allow them to flee to the deserts of Egypt. Anyway, but so as you're bombing someone and you say, we're encouraging you to migrate, I mean, it'd be like, walking into someone's house, start shooting their family and saying, I'm encouraging you to move out of your house. Would you go, well, that guy gave a light encouragement that they move? He just made a recommendation. Sure, he killed 2 out of 7 of their family, but he made a recommendation that they leave the house. That's not a recommendation. That's just a threat while you murder their friends and family. And each of these statements, when you lay them next to what's going on, is an admission of a plan of ethnic cleansing. And again, this is not the first one. This is not the only one. If this were the only one, you could say maybe this guy, the finance minister, is a little unhinged, didn't know what he was saying, doesn't know what he's talking about. But this is one of many admissions that the Israeli government has had publicly, including Netanyahu getting in front of the UN, holding up a map. This is days before October 7th, holding up a map with Gaza and with the West Bank erased from the map of the Middle East. So also, Smotrich said, we will permanently control the Gaza Strip. So again, admission of ethnic cleansing, to ensure security and establish an Israeli settlement there. Again, admission of ethnic cleansing. We will permanently control, move out the current residents, and settle the area for our own people. That is the definition of ethnic cleansing. Now, it might not be the definition of genocide, but their other actions are genocide. So here he is, the finance minister of Israel, along with many others, admitting to a plan of ethnic cleansing. Now, many have said that they have tried to defend Israel and say, no, the one thing that makes this not genocide, the one thing, if you go down the list of the genocide definition, and I have on this show, if you go down the list, every box will be checked off. And all you got to do is one of those checked off, and it's genocide. But all 7 of them, or whatever it is, 7 or 8 or something, Israel checks off all of them. But the one thing people try and argue as to why this is not genocide, they go, you have to prove intent. It's not enough to just obliterate an entire people's, killing the, tens of thousands. You have to prove intent. Well, luckily, many Israeli ministers, including Netanyahu and many in the Israeli government, have proven their intent. We have them publicly saying things that endorse ethnic cleansing. And Smotrich is just the latest of the list of those in the Israeli government and the IDF endorsing and saying the goal is ethnic cleansing. The goal is a form of genocide. Absolutely horrific. Absolutely. There's no way you can stand for this. There's no way you can endorse this. There's no way that any of us and any of our countries should be standing by and saying this is fine. And this has been going on for 3 months now. It's absolutely despicable. But luckily, you do have people like Gal Gadot, who, Wonder Woman, who here's a clip of her. You can't really hear it, but it's subtitled. But of her talking about how tough it is to endorse genocide as she's doing right now. It's just emotionally exhausting to endorse genocide. She's doing this filmed interview, and the interviewer asks her,
How are you feeling now? How are you feeling these days?
Can't hear anything. But she starts crying because it is really difficult to endorse and support genocide like this. It's really tough. She says she's not doing great, as we can all imagine. I mean, when you're a spokesperson for genocide, it's got to be exhausting. It's got to be. She tears up. She has to pause because it's really rough. And then she says she's happy to be alive, which that's true. The rich people who are not in Gaza, and rich doesn't really matter, but the people who are not in Gaza, not being genocided, they tend to be the one that are alive more easily. They tend to remain alive more easily when you're super rich and flying around the world and not living in Gaza and allowed to actually exit Gaza if you were ever there, which I can assure you she's never been. But yeah, she's saying she's lucky to be alive as she continues to endorse genocide. And she says she feels like she has to do something because it doesn't feel okay to not do anything. And for her, that means to continue going around promoting genocide, which is, good for her. Good for her. Then she tears up again. The interviewer rubs her knee. For those of you listening to the podcast, I'll give the play-by-play. Interviewer rubs her knee. She is former IDF, but everybody in Israel is former IDF because you have to serve 2 years in Israel. Actually, I'm going to bring you the story of someone who yet another person who attempted not to serve in the IDF. But the interviewer, touches her knee, and isn't that great, that show of humanity where it's just like, listen, I'm here for you if endorsing this genocide is tough. I'm here, and I will give you a pat on the back because I'm sure your life must be rough as you run around the world endorsing genocide. It just can't be easy. Anyway, good to hear from her. But so she did serve in the IDF. Sometimes it's tough to avoid using the propagandistic terms that we're given, and even I, and maybe even you, sometimes do that. I just said serve in the military, right? They gave us that term, and it's the U.S. military as well, meaning that all anyone who gets involved in these mass machines of organized murder is serving their country. It's a service to be a part of mass murder. So thank you for your service to that. Really is beautiful. But, and it is tough to get around a lot of these terms. But anyway, she was in the IDF, as every Israeli has to serve. God damn it. It is impossible to avoid these terms. Has to be in the IDF for 2 years. I, back on Redacted Tonight, interviewed the father of someone who's his two children. He's the father. His two children are conscientious objectors. They refuse to be in the IDF. And for that, usually these people are locked up. And his two children fled the country. I think he emailed me the other day, and in the midst of this horror show that is genocide, and he said luckily his kids are safe in another country right now because they can't be in Israel because they would be locked up in prison for not being in the military that's perpetrating the genocide. But here is the story of another Israeli military refuser who was sentenced to prison after exposing the lies behind the Gaza genocide. But it's not about exposing the lies. They lock up anybody who refuses to go into the IDF because they don't want it to set an example. Anyway, here's his 14 seconds. It's in Hebrew, but it's subtitled. Well, hold on. For those of you fluent in Hebrew out there, I'm standing today at the base and I'm refusing to enlist. I believe that slaughter cannot solve slaughter. The criminal attack on Gaza does not solve the atrocious slaughter by Hamas, and that is why I refuse. And so now they're locking him up in prison, which is generally what they do when anyone refuses to partake, refuses to be a genocider with them, refuses to serve up a hot cup of genocider with the rest of the IDF. Another quick update. South Africa has launched a case at the top of the UN court accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. So thank you, South Africa. And of course, South Africa has a special connection to all of this because they used to be an apartheid state. And so they know apartheid well. And Israel is an apartheid state. Again, by dictionary definition. South Africa launched a case Friday at the United Nations top court accusing Israel of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza and asking the court to order Israel to halt, this is from the Associated Press, by the way, to halt its attacks, the first such challenge made at the court over the current war. Israel swiftly rejected the filing with disgust. Israel is disgusted to be accused of the thing they're doing. Isn't that just revolting when someone accuses you of doing what you're doing? South Africa's submission to the International Court of Justice alleges that acts and omissions by Israel are genocidal in character. They didn't want to say just genocide, so they softened it a little. It's genocidal in character. It's like saying to your friend, you're acting a little genocide-y. There's a little. I don't want to say you're genociding people, but it's just it's a touch genocide-y. As they're committed with the intent, quote, to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. And as I've brought you many public admissions of them saying Palestinians will no longer be in Gaza. Pure admissions of ethnic cleansing. As part of a broader Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group. South Africa has been a fierce critic of Israel's military campaign in Gaza. So there's the first country to bring it to the UN High Court that Israel is committing genocide. Meanwhile, Joe Biden, the Biden administration goes along with all of Congress and all of our government, with the exception of about 3 people, in sending more weapons to Israel. But again, this is the second time the Biden administration bypasses Congress for weapons sales to Israel. And I believe there's 2 purposes to this. So So as I've mentioned before, Congress is supposed to declare war. They don't anymore. We don't really declare war anymore. At no point does the U.S. presidency go to Congress and say, I would like to declare war, and then have to get their approval. Never happens anymore. However, until now, it still was basically a requirement with some loopholes, but basically a requirement for the administration to go through Congress and get approval for weapons and weapons sales. And remember, there were a bunch of fights in Congress over the billions given to Ukraine in order to, get more weapons, sending weapons to Ukraine. There were a bunch of fights in Congress, and it was mainly actually Republicans trying to hold them up. Not a lot, but a few. And again, those Republicans are also pieces of shit. They're just different flavors of shit than the Democrats, because we are owned by a two-party corporate system that stands for 98% all the same shit. And so pretending that they're different is just a fool's game, and you are a child if you think they're actively that different. But anyway, remember there was a fight over sending weapons to Ukraine. And each time we send another 100 billion to Ukraine, there's another fight over sending. Well, Biden is just avoiding all of that. And I'd say he's avoiding it for two reasons. One is because there could be one Republican like Rand Paul, or maybe one Democrat, although that rarely happens, that stand in the way somehow of the process and somehow slow it down so that the stuff doesn't get to Israel as quickly. That might be part of it. I think another big reason is because they wanted to set this precedent that the American president can now just send weapons to other countries to obliterate people and murder children without going through Congress, which is kind of hilarious considering how much agreement they get from Congress, especially on this issue. There is perhaps no other issue that you get more pure agreement across Congress than sending weapons to kill children to Israel, sending the weapons to Israel so they can kill children. That is like the number one agreement in Congress. I mean, they voted, what was it, 400 and whatever to 1 in the House to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, which is laughable and bullshit, and also harmful to Jews around the world to equate those two. But then in the Senate, they voted 97-0 to quote unquote support Israel. So he would have gotten mass support from Congress. The administration would have gotten mass support for sending all these weapons to Israel to continue to perpetrate this genocide. But Biden administration, for the second time, has avoided going to Congress anyway. Really a horrible precedent that we're yet again proving. And so whenever they talk about whenever the Democrats talk about how dangerous Trump is, or the mainstream media talks about how dangerous Trump is and he's so dangerous, just keep in mind that it's the Democrats and Biden that are actually empowering all the Trumps of the world. And when he gets into office, now he's got all these tools. And actually, again, I'm always right. I don't actually mean that, but the truth is, if you look at all the big stuff, I cannot point to anything I've been wrong about. But I used to say I put out multiple videos during the Obama administration, and one of about this topic. And one of the ways I phrased it was, and I can't remember which. I know it had something to do with the military and the surveillance. Maybe it had to do with surveillance. But my point was just, even if you love Obama, I was talking to all the liberals out there. Even if Obama's the best thing you've ever seen, oh my God, he's amazing, we just love him. Even if that were true, he is handing, by removing all the safeguards on surveillance and sending bombs and dropping 28,000 bombs a year, etc. He is removing all the safeguards. He is handing a dictator's toolkit off to the next administration and the next people in power. So, and literally, this is years before Trump got into office. I said in that video, back in whatever it was, 2012 or something, I said, imagine if the next president is, and I gave a list of like 3 or 4 horrific people. And one of the ones I said was Donald Trump. And I said it as a joke. It was meant to be a punchline because Trump had barely ever even floated the idea of running for president. So it was a joke back then. It was like, what if Trump gets to the office and he has a dictator's toolkit at his fingertips because Obama has taken off all these safeguards? And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But as I've made the point many times, You shouldn't have loved Obama because it was all the same shit. Okay. Oh, all right. That's right. I want to bring you this. Before I bring you, oh God, this. Well, let me bring you this update. Which I mentioned this earlier about how the entire health system is breaking down, and intentionally, Israel is intentionally breaking it down. Quds News Network is reporting that Al Sadaka Cancer Hospital spokesperson in Gaza says 10,000 cancer patients are now completely without medication after the hospital went out of service. So 10,000 patients who need these medications to survive are now without their medications. Again, that is the goal of Israel. They are trying to kill as many people as possible by not just by bombs, but by every manner outside of bombs as well. Cutting off the food, cutting off the water, cutting off the medications. And so there are now 10,000 patients at this one hospital without medication for their cancer. And of course, much of that cancer was caused in the first place by Israel's efforts to only give dirty water to Gaza, to give dirty food to Gaza. So much of that cancer was caused by Israel to begin with, long before October 7th. So anyone who thinks this began in October 7th, you really haven't done your homework. But more on. Okay, so before I bring you. Oh, man. Yeah, hold on. Hold on a second. Please hold, everybody. This is the wonderful aspect of a live broadcast. Anyway, Israel has announced. I can't find the article. I want to show you the article, but Israel has announced that they're pulling out a lot of their ground troops from a certain area in South Gaza because they have made no progress, which is a huge admission. It shows the failures of the IDF ground offensive. Now, I always want to preface this with saying Israel's enough bombs to just continue to level Gaza. So it's not like I think Hamas is going to win and they're going to defeat the IDF. But it speaks to the fact that the IDF's ground forces are not actually achieving what they claim that they initially said they were going to do. Let's see. So this is here's one article. It's not the one I wanted to bring you, but this is from NPR. Israel pulls thousands of troops from Gaza as combat focuses on one city, Khan Yunis. Thousands of Israeli soldiers are being shifted out of the Gaza Strip, the military said Monday, in the first significant drawdown of troops since the war began, as forces continued to bear down on the main city in the southern half of the enclave. Now, Israel is trying to claim that it's for other reasons. Oh, they're just shifting the forces around, blah, blah, blah. But it's because they didn't win. It's because they couldn't make any progress. Satellite imagery was studied by Al Jazeera, and it showed that their forces, after something like 4 days of trying to advance on this area, just were basically being defeated or couldn't advance. And so this is not admission, but it's a huge, I don't know, note of how the Israeli forces are succeeding or not succeeding. And Israel really doesn't want people to know these failures, but this is kind of crazy for a militant group that has technically had all of their incoming support, all of their firearms and everything else cut off for years, but they've been able to amass this kind of resistance against the IDF. Of course, this will not stop Israel from just obliterating civilians left and right. So it's not like, to me, this is not like, oh, yay, look, wonderful. And for people that are, tweeting like, oh, we Hamas are winning, or like it, and there aren't that many of those people out there. There's a few, but it's all disgusting. It's all grisly, but I want to bring you the truth. And the truth is the IDF on the ground is faltering heavily. They've lost way more people than they want to admit. The troop movement could signal that the fighting is being scaled back in some areas of Gaza, particularly in the northern half where the military has said, but the latest pullback was not in the northern part, though. Israel has been under pressure from, oh, please, NPR, you're full of shit. They pressure from the United States. Yeah, they're under pressure from the United States, even as the United States sends them more bombs. I'm sure that pressure is really tough on Israel. Fierce fighting continued in other areas of Gaza, especially the southern city of Khan Yunis and central areas of the territory. Israel has pledged to charge ahead until its war aims have been achieved. 5 brigades or several thousand troops were being taken out of Gaza in the coming weeks for training and rest. And again, this shows how much the IDF's ground troops are failing, which is, it tells you a lot about the IDF, that they seem to only have supremacy in the sky. And that also means a lot in terms of Hezbollah. Israel is a front on multi sides now because they've chosen to commit this genocide. And so it's, yeah, I don't know what else to say about it except that. But it is a big advancement in terms of the understanding of exactly how the IDF is working. So I said I'd bring you more about the food situation in Gaza, and also I'm going to bring you one of the, it would be funny if it weren't so dark, moments of the New York Times and their just insane propaganda, but it's like they don't even know how hilariously disgusting they appear. Anyway, this is the New York Times saying half of Gazans are at risk of starving. The UN is warning more than 90% of Palestinians in the territory say they have regularly gone without food for a whole day, according to the UN. So 90% of Gazans are unable to actually eat a full amount of meals. I know a lot of you might not find that shocking, but that is horrific. 90% are often not eating for a whole day. And then half of them are at risk of starving to death. Half of the entire, I don't know how many remain in Gaza after all this killing, but I guess still 2.1, 2.2 million. And half of them are at a risk of starving to death. And yet again, what purpose does that serve? Well, some of them may starve to death, but I think more important than that, it lowers the defenses for fighting a disease. So yet again, Israel can have disease do a lot of the job that they can't do with bombs. This brings an individual whose 4 children have been hungry for weeks. Yeah, I mean, it is, and this is the New York Times. So I can't imagine anyone reading the New York Times, even though they do so much propaganda for Israel, and they've been doing propaganda for Israel for years and years and years. I can't imagine anyone reading about a man and his children and how his children are starving to death and reading that and going, sounds good to me. Sounds fine. Let's keep that going. But all right. So that article was on the front page, and look at what was next to it. This is me tweeting out an image of it. I may be too small for you to read, but anyway, I tweeted, the ongoing genocide by Israel is creating some truly dystopian and surreal corporate media coverage, such as the cover of today's New York Times, featuring a report that half of Gazans are at risk of starving to death. And they feature that report alongside the best cooking recipes for New Year's. There it is. The best, considering of taking up cooking for New Year's, here's your best recipes. I mean, how dystopian do we have to get? How insanely dystopian do we have to get that you have an article about millions of people starving to death next to an article about, here's some great recipes for you in your new year? I mean, it both speaks to what the New York Times is, but it also speaks to what Americans are. And of course, the number one audience for the New York Times is Americans. Uh, that so many Americans are just looking the other way while this genocide goes on. So many of us are just lost in the vapid spectacle of consumerism and reality TV. And when I say reality TV, I don't just mean the reality TV shows. I mean our cable news channels. It's all reality TV. It's all people playing a role, acting like who gets into Congress even freaking matters anymore is kind of laughable in this situation. When was the last time that Congress did something for the people of America that did not align with corporate interests? Never, zero, ever. Doesn't happen. So to sit there and have a back and forth about who's in Congress, who's gonna get into Congress, it's all ridiculous. And yet we're just lost in that world. We're lost in that VR. We're lost in that fake fucking nothingness. We're staring at nothingness while the reality is people are dying around the world. And the New York Times knows that that's their audience. So they're going to give them, here's how to cook your cookie, cook it stuff while these people die. Don't forget to cook your things. I mean, just Jesus. All right. All of that is to say there's a protest coming up. Another one. I was at the last one with roughly 300,000 people in Washington, D.C. This is from Answer Coalition, as well as many others, American Muslim Task Force for Palestine, a bunch of other organizations all getting together to have another very large march on Washington, on this one on the National Mall, January 13th. It begins at 1 p.m. Again, I was at the last one, and the number of people there was truly unbelievable. The pro-genocide, pro-Israel rally that went on, which, again, I don't want to actually say everyone at the pro-Israel rally was a monster. Hell, some of them were my extended family. It's that it's a combination of the people there are, one, those who do understand what's going on and support genocide. Two, people who actually paid to be there, which I've brought you the advertisements offering $250 per student to go to the rally. And then three, and this is probably the biggest segment of those, I think people estimate it was 100,000. So smaller than the Palestine rally, but still large. Three on that list, which may have been the biggest portion of people, is just people who don't get it. People who, Jewish their whole life, as have I been, Jewish by birth and culture, atheist by choice, but who've been Jewish their whole life. They think that being Jewish means support Israel, which I did as well when I was a child, because that's what we're told. Being Jewish equals support Israel. And they have never researched beyond that. That is end of information. And they go to these rallies because yay. And that is the extent of what they know. And if you were to ask them or try and debate with them beyond that, they couldn't really give you anything except they might bring up the Holocaust. Which again, you bring up the Holocaust in that debate, that's hilarious as well, because what did the Holocaust teach us? Well, it gave us all kinds of international anti-genocide laws. It gave us international laws against war crimes, and all of those are being broken by Israel right now as it commits a genocide. And so, we could say, thank you for international community for seeing how horrific the Holocaust was and then changing and putting in place laws to stop it from happening again. But no thank you, Israel, for breaking all those laws and committing genocide. You see how that works? Anyway, you can find more information on this March, January 13th and on the Answer Coalition website, as well as marchforgaza.org. MARCH 4, the number 4, Gaza.org. Marchforgaza.org, which is confusing because it's not going to be in March. It's going to be in January. So this is not a march in March for Gaza. It's a march in January for Gaza, which I hope that doesn't throw you off too much. But anyway, January 13th, 1 p.m. Attend if you can make it, and promote it. Let people know. But okay, I'm going to take a moment before we go to just Rumble to talk about the loss of two epic activists, journalists, The one you're probably most familiar with, John Pilger, has died at 84. Renowned Australian journalist. He lived in the UK since the 1960s or 70s, I think, and he has passed away. The renowned Australian-born investigative journalist who was a trenchant critic of the West's imperialist foreign policy has died at 84. His main focus was uncovering and exposing abuses of power by governments and large corporations. He was an unwavering critic of the United States, Australia, and the UK's foreign policies, which he considered to be driven by an imperialist and colonialist agenda. He was a vocal critic of the US-led military interventions in countries such as Iraq and Afghanistan. He also was a massive supporter of Julian Assange and really devoted his life in many ways to freeing Assange, devoted many of his later years. And yeah, just epic journalist, definitely one of the good guys, fighting for a better world, fighting against these empires as they wreak havoc on so many others around the world. Just a true, excellent journalist. And you know, I'm sad to say I never did interview him on my shows. I've gotten to meet and interview a lot of the people that I looked up to over the years, but he was never on the show, unfortunately. But yeah, just did so much great work and so much great work for Julian Assange. I am sad he never got to see Julian Assange free, but hopefully that will be any day now. So rest in power, John Pilger. Then another pretty well-known and epic activist. I didn't know him well, but many of my friends and colleagues were huge fans of his writing, his books, and you know, he was chained himself to pipelines. He was one of those guys who was in the fight for real. Cleve Benally, cultural advocate and land defender. He died at 48 just yesterday, and it really is another tough loss. There's not a lot of information yet, but hopefully I will be bringing you a more in-depth segment in the next few days on Cleve Benally and all the wonderful work he did. Oh, God. But yeah, that's the end of 2023. So thanks for going out on a shit show, 2023. Okay, the rest of this, which includes, I think I can get, yeah, we'll include two of the year's most censored stories coming up, including important revelations about U.S. biolab leaks inside the U.S. That is one of the most censored stories of the year. So I'll be bringing you that at rumble.com/leecamp. It's free to watch there, rumble.com/leecamp. And please, when you get there, hit subscribe, hit share, hit thumbs up. But if you hit the follow button, which again, free, make sure you hit the bell icon. If you are already a follower and you don't know where to find the bell icon and you're like, I don't even know if I've clicked the thing that gets me alerted. That might be because you're on the video page, actually watching this live stream right now. Open another tab, go to just rumble.com/leecamp, which is the main page. And under my photo and everything, you should see follow. And then next to it, you should see the bell icon. If the bell icon has a slash through it, you are not being notified about my videos. So make sure you click that notification thing. Otherwise, following me is, borderline meaningless. Okay. So all that's at rumble.com as well as my locals page, rumble.com/leecamp. That's rumble.com/leecamp. Join me on rumble.com/leecamp. How many times do I have to say rumble.com/leecamp? Should I say it one more time? Rumble.com/leecamp. All right. See you there. And for those of you watching at Rumbles, everything stays the same.